Good evening, guys. Hope you had a great day today. This is Marie Horn. I am here this evening, and we're going to dive into this lesson um, addressing the abortion issue that we see causing so much chaos. And right now, we're in the midst of a presidential election coming up, and that seems to be one of the biggest. There are several, but this seems to be one of the biggest on the plate, if you will, the one of those that's being pushed a lot. Uh, and so I just want to address this. And let me preference here from the beginning. This video is not to judge anyone who has had an abortion, even if you're considering having an abortion. Prayerfully, something that I say in this video will help you to seek out other alternatives. Okay. But as a minister, as a servant of God, as a Bible teacher, I stand on the word of God. And so it's important to me to use my voice to speak on such an issue as this. I've shared many other videos on my platform of my personal experience with having abortions and how that left me feeling guilty and in a very deep, dark, depressive state, if you will. And it haunted me for so many years. It was the one thing out of all of the things that I had done, that was the one thing that I feared people knowing. And so often people ask me, how can I be so candid and so bold and so brave to speak about these things? I know that I'm free. And that was something that uh, I had a conversation with the Holy Spirit about. If I'm going to do this, I have to be free. I can't have my past hanging over my shoulder. I can't have Satan dingling my sins in my face and having to be afraid of people finding out my past. And so I didn't want to ever, as a servant of God, have to speak on something that I was going to be afraid someone would find out about me. So I'm open about things such as this topic. And so we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to look at have a PowerPoint with a couple of short videos. And then I have some articles, quite a few articles, just going to go through those, but I am going to link those so that I can cite my sources, give you guys some receipts. And so you can go and read further because there are just certain things that I want to highlight for this lesson. But I want to say this. When it comes to the issue of abortion, oftentimes arguments in support of abortion use this idea and promote this ideology that um, abortions are necessary because it's of women, having needing emergency surgeries, and it being a life or death matter. Let me say this. While that is true, and those cases do happen, they are not happening to the effect that people are trying to promote and push this to be. Okay. We're going to look at some startling numbers here in a moment. But for those of us who are believers, and there are Christians who are in support of this, we're going to talk about pastors at the end, but there are Christians who are in line with this, who are in support of this, because who's not going to support women's rights after all of the women's suffrage and what women have gone through, throughout history? Who wouldn't support women, having a say so over their own body? Nobody can tell women what to do with their bodies, right? That's the argument, that it's our body and nobody can tell us what to do with it. And it's interesting to me that when we're making this argument, when we see this argument being pushed, that nobody can tell women what to do with their bodies, especially government. I find it so interesting because government should keep their hands out of women's wombs, but government can force certain ideologies in our curriculums, in our classrooms with our children, and parents can't have any say so. So is that not government overreaching as well? Is that not government dictating to parents what their children should and should not be learning when transgenders are being allowed in places to be before our children and influencing our children? I'm just saying, you need to think about that. I brought some friends with me before we get into this lesson. So these are my babies. And years ago, I had an outreach and it was called Help Them to Make It. So these are my babies, my display babies. And when I would go to Girls Inc. or to different schools and talk to girls about these type things, and boys, because they need to know, I use my little babies here, and I would allow them to hold them. Some of them, would be afraid because these babies carry the weight of an actual baby. And so from 12 weeks to 26 weeks, we have these babies here. And from this smallest one, 12 weeks, if you were able to see this baby, I don't know if you all can see, this 12-week-old baby has everything. Okay. Eyes, ears, nose, mouth, arms folded. You can see the sex of the baby. This is a human being, 12 weeks, right? And then this one, each one gets a little bit heavier. But I just thought that I would bring my babies on here and show them to you. Okay. And so this one, the largest one in my display is 26 weeks. 26 weeks. And this is a heavy baby. Okay. And I wanted to show that so that we can get the gist and understand. We don't need to play games when we talk about, is this a life or not? Okay. We need to stop playing those games. It's not a question of if it's a life. It's a question of, do you care that it's a life? And we've got to stop contradicting ourselves, because if a pregnant mother, someone harmed a pregnant mother and she died and that baby died, it's life. But this life doesn't matter when it comes to women's health, women's reproductive rights. We've got to stop contradicting ourselves. And so what I'm going to do, we're going to watch a video. We're going to talk about a couple of things here. We're going to look at the 2 abortion pills now. They're making it more convenient to do this. When I went, there were clinics and you had to go through the back door because it was dangerous to come through the front door. But they're having this now where you can actually get these mailed to you. You can go pick them up from the clinic. It's so inconvenient, now with the unwanted pregnancies. And I want to make sure I differentiate that I'm not speaking specifically to incest and rape. I'm going to talk about that on the end. I'm specifically targeting now just unwanted pregnancies. I mean, I had sex, it was fun, but we wasn't trying to have no baby. So I'm not trying to do this. So let me just go ahead and get rid of this baby, because this is an inconvenience for my life. It's an inconvenience for his life, or he really don't have a say-so because it's my life and I'm trying to pursue my goals and my dreams, and I just don't have time for a baby. So you're going to hear a brief video, I think maybe 2 minutes. And so let me go to screen share, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this.
Medication abortion in the United States involves 2 pills, Mifepristone and Misoprostol, and can be safely used up to the first 11 weeks of pregnancy. The first pill that blocks pregnancy hormones is a single pill that patients can swallow. The second pill is actually 4 separate pills. To get the dose high enough, you have to take 4 of them. But you don't want to swallow them. So they either go under the tongue or in the buccal mucosa. The chances that this will be successful, 98%. There's less than 1% chance that a patient who uses this regimen needs any kind of hospitalization, blood transfusion, antibiotics, or needs a surgical procedure. So that's something I really want to emphasize to patients. The two medications, mifepristone and misoprostol, are safer than many other medications that I prescribe, including penicillin or Tylenol or insulin. When you're placing those 4 tablets inside your buccal mucosa, that's when to expect, within 2 to 4 hours, quite a bit of cramping and bleeding. The bleeding is going to be heavier than a period for sure. The cramping is going to be, I say, like a really bad period. And sometimes that trickle light bleeding can continue for about 7 days, 7 to 14 days. If there's maxi pads being filled to an hour for 2 consecutive hours, and I like to explain it as, front to back, side to side, being filled. That we consider is an emergency. So patients should be reaching out to their healthcare provider. If they're not reaching their healthcare provider, consider going to a local emergency room.
Okay, so it was interesting to me that she says this is safe. This is safer than any other pills that she has prescribed. And I will say this, if you go and do more research, what you find with this pill is versus going to the clinic and having your baby, you being sedated, not sedated, but you kind of being numb because you're alert, you're aware, and you hear this vacuum, and this baby is being vacuumed out of you. Just imagine. This is 12 weeks. She said this is up to 11 weeks. We're going to see some other numbers here. But this life is getting vacuumed out of you. Okay. And so it was interesting to me that she said that. And that's how it works in the actual clinic. With this pill, when you take these pills consecutively, like she said, the first pill, and then a couple of hours later, the second pill, what happens is this is the one that actually is taking the life of the baby. And this is going to cause you to bleed, to have like a cycle. And what's going to happen is you're going to bleed, and this baby is going to come out, and chances are you're going to flush this baby in the toilet, or you're going to see a residue of this baby on your pad, if you will. I will say this, to hear her say, and so many of them say that this is safe, I can't agree with that. There is no safety in abortion, period. As no no procedures are completely safe, and there are side effects. Okay, so those who are those, excuse me, those of you that are considering that, I just want you to keep that in mind. So sorry. Um, so yeah, I just thought that was interesting that she would say that. And so we're gonna go to this next video. I don't know how many of you may have heard of Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger pushed really hard and succeeded illegally, just a rebel at getting contraceptives to women during a time when it was illegal, opening up illegal clinics. And I want you to watch this little short real. But then we're going to go to an article of hers here later. So let's listen to what about Margaret Sanger. And I really hope you pay attention to what this is saying about this woman.
By 1913, Margaret Sanger had been drawn into the socialist and feminist movements while also supporting eugenics. In 1913, she and her husband separated when she returned home from Paris while her husband stayed to pursue his interest as an artist. In March 1914, she began a monthly publication called The Woman Rebel, in which she promoted female contraception using the slogan, "No gods, no masters." At the time, it was illegal to promote contraception via mail, and so she was charged and fled the US to England. In 1915, she returned and began importing illegal contraceptives into the US. In October 1916, she illegally opened the first birth control clinic and was arrested 9 days later. After being released, she continued opening her clinic until she was evicted. In 1920, she finalized her divorce from her first husband while also publishing her first book, Woman in the New Race, which advocated for contraception as a means to limit the world's population.
And I thought that was very interesting, because this said quite a few things about Margaret Sanger. And I hope you paid attention. She advocated for contraceptives as a means to depopulate the world. Okay, and we're going to get into this eugenics part here shortly. And we're going to get into how she literally solicited, pastors and politicians and physicians to assist her with reaching the Black community, Black women. And there were some things, there's a quote we're going to go to here shortly, but she was separated from her husband. A socialist feminist movement is what Margaret Sanger was into. A woman rebel publication which promoted female contraceptives. Her slogan was "No gods, no masters." So, you know, that whole nobody can tell women what to do with their bodies. Illegally imported contraceptives, illegally opened first birth control clinic, arrested, and then still went and opened the clinic again, was eventually evicted, divorced her husband. And so when I think about Christian women, and oftentimes as Christian women, how we get behind secular people, you know, celebrities, these artists, we get behind them and they show us what they're about and what they're promoting. But as Christian women, we will still get behind them and support them. Margaret Sanger is not a woman that any woman of God, and certainly not our little girls, should be looking up to. And so I just thought that that was really, 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 really dangerous for, you know, to see that this is who this lady was and how she's had all of this impact all these years later. We're still fighting for the things that she fought for, and we're calling it women's rights. Now, if you're a Christian woman, we got to get to some deeper stuff here, because we either gonna stand on the Bible or we're gonna go with the culture. But we can't do both. We cannot. Let's listen to what Kamala Harris says about even now on her campaign run. She is pushing this very heavily. And this was last year. This video was last year.
This is an issue that, yes, I do believe will be resolved in November of next year, because I do know that the American people fight for freedom and believe in the woman's right to make decisions about her own body. But understand, every day until then, there are women suffering in our country in horrible ways. And look, let me tell you, there's going to be a split screen on this too in November of 24, to your point about the election. There's really going to be, of all the issues we've discussed so far, none of them are binary. This one is. November 24 binary. On the one hand, you're going to have the folks who are standing, such as President Joe Biden and me, saying we trust women to be able to make a decision about what is in their best interest, and women can trust us to protect their fundamental freedoms. And on the other hand, you're going to have folks who want a national ban and have the gall to tell women who are even survivors of rape or incest that they don't have the right to make decisions about what happens to their body next.
And let me just say this, that part again, the propaganda, always making this about either emergency surgeries. And again, there are women, I've had family members who have gone through that, and there was a life or death situation where a choice had to be made between that mother or that child. Okay, so those do exist. They are not the norm. In the case of incest and rape, that's absolutely true as well. However, we can't try to make those the norms when we look at these statistics or these articles that we're about to look at, and make it as if all of these abortions are the result of women being raped or of incest or emergency situations where it's a life or death matter for this mother. No, this is about depopulation. This is about government control. Although it's being pushed as, those on the other side are trying to control. Again, this goes back to there's control even in this, because there are certain things you can, as a parent who has children, that you can and you cannot do with your children, because the government is going to hold you responsible. And I'm not talking about things like abuse. I'm talking about, again, as I mentioned, things like there are some parents who don't want their children in classrooms where they're being taught about their sexual orientation, and they get to choose what they want. Or we're going to bring transgenders, and we're going to present this whole LGBTQ plus community before our children, and we're going to force it down children's throats, force it in their faces of children who this is not their lifestyle. This is not the makeup of their home. And so that's government control as well. But we're not seeing that. We're more so focused on, this is a woman's right to kill babies, to murder babies. That's what we're saying. And the government is aiding us in being able to do that. Okay. And don't get me wrong, women can do what they want to do. You don't have to answer to the right. We all have to answer to God, whether you believe him or not. Margaret Sanger saying no gods, no masters. At the end of every person's life, we have to answer a sovereign God, and those who don't believe will find out when they are judged. Let's look at, this is one more video we're going to take a look at. Do I want to go here? No, I don't want to go here. I want to go here instead. I want to go here, and I want us to look at a couple of things. This is, this was from, this article was updated Tuesday, August the 13th. Okay. And it's about a 6-minute read. I'm gonna put the link in the comment section once I post this video. And this is a Dr. Todd Ivy. And what she's pretty much talking about is, because abortions have been banned, we're going to see this whole map. She's talking about places where abortions have been banned, and New Mexico is soliciting doctors in Texas who, some have quit their practices, some are struggling out of fear because abortions have been banned in Texas. And so she's saying, hey, come on over here. y'all's residents are coming over here anyway, so y'all shouldn't have to be afraid of losing your license or being fined, you know, up to hundreds of thousands of dollars it is. And so again, this is being looked at as a women's reproductive rights, women's health care. But that's what she's doing here in this article. For instance, doctors who violate the law risk up to $100,000 in penalty, not to mention the loss of their medical license and prison time. Let me say this. This is so interesting to me because doctors take oaths, just like judges and lawyers and police officers and military people. So they take oaths to um, preserve life, not to take it. And all of these cases are not emergency cases. So as a doctor, some of these doctors are leaving the practice because if you're a doctor who stands on your Christian values and principles, you can't continue to do this. You're going to be convicted. There is no way a doctor can be a Christian and continue to perform these. It's just like infanticide. You're assisting people in taking their life. You know, this is crazy. Let's go to another one here. This is Planned Parenthood. This is the one I want you to see about Margaret Sanger. Planned Parenthood is the leading provider of high quality, affordable health care and the nation's largest provider of sex education. More than 2 million patients each year rely on Planned Parenthood for expert, innovative, inclusive health services. I myself went through Planned Parenthood for an abortion. So let's look here, because what I've noticed, I believe the lady Madeline O'Hare that wanted prayer taken out of school. It's interesting when you start looking into these people's history, there's something that was missing or absent or just wrong, where they saw the need for them to push for these. Kamala Harris does not have children. Her husband had 2 children when they met, but she herself has never given birth to anything. Okay. Planned Parenthood traces its roots back to a nurse named Margaret Sanger. Sanger grew up in an Irish family of 11 children in Corning, New York. Her mother, in fragile health from many pregnancies, including 7 miscarriages, died at age 50 of tuberculosis. Okay, let's go on down here. Her mother was her influence for her to get this whole thing started. Her sister assisted her with opening up these birth control clinics. But let's go down here. Again, we already saw in the reel that she kept getting arrested, but she still kept rebelling and kept going back. She just would not stop. She was a persistent woman. Let's look at these eugenics. Sanger believed in eugenics, an inherently racist and albeit ideology that labels certain people unfit to have children. Eugenics is the theory that society can be improved through planned breeding for desirable traits like intelligence and industriousness. In the early 20th century, eugenic ideas were popular among highly educated, privileged, and mostly white Americans. Margaret Sanger pronounced her belief in an alignment with the eugenics movement many times in her writings, especially in the scientific journal Birth Control. At times, Sanger tried to argue for eugenics that was not applied based on race or religion. That failed, though. Let's go right here. Sanger was so intent on her mission to advocate for birth control that she chose to align herself with ideas and organizations that were ableist and white supremacists, hence the KKK. Let's go down here with the Negro Project. In 1939, Sanger began what was called the Negro Project, alongside Black leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. The mission of the Negro Project was to put Black doctors and nurses in charge of birth control clinics to reduce mistrust of a racist healthcare system. Sanger lost control of the project, and Black women were sent to white doctors for birth control and follow-up appointments, deepening the racist and paternalistic problems of healthcare in the South. So here we have somebody, and she said, when you go on down, I think it's this article or another one, where it talks about, hold up. Mm, maybe another article. But it was interesting because she figured it would be better for her because Black people had issues with white people. And so she figured it would be best to get these preachers, get these Black preachers, use them to entice and encourage these women to get these abortions. And so, you know, I just think that's crazy, the fact that you using pastors, and pastors are going along with this. Let's see. President Biden to sign executive order, and this article was July 8, 2022, okay? And this is pretty much talking about the reproductive health care that Biden was going to, let me see, 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court issued a decision that overturned Roe-v-Wade and eliminated a woman's constitutional right to choose. This decision expressly took away a right from the American people that it had recognized for nearly 50 years. A woman's right to make her own reproductive health care decisions, free from government interference. Fundamental rights to privacy, autonomy, freedom, and equality have been denied to millions of women across the country, with grave implications for their health, lives, and well-being. This ruling will disproportionately affect women of color, low-income women, and rural women. Okay, so this is about Black women. This is let's do this to help Black women, women of color, low-income women, and rural women. All right, let's look at this. Now, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, let me see. This is my article. Yeah. This article was March 2020, 24, Loretta Brown. Abortion hit the highest number in over a decade after fall of Roe v. Wade. This is what broke my heart when I read this article. A recent study from Guttmacher Institute, an organization that supports abortion access, found that the number of abortions in 2023 has increased to the highest number and rate in the United States over a decade. Guys, look, the study showed that an estimated over 1 million abortions occurred in the formal healthcare system in 2023. This was an all-out rebellion, if you will. And I'm pretty sure they celebrated, you know, that they did this irregardless to Roe v. Wade failing. It goes on to say, I'm going to link this if you want to go ahead and you want to read this. Let me go to my next one because we're going to come back to the slide. Now, this is a map, how the end of Roe v. Wade will affect abortion clinic access in the United States. This article was from July 5th, 2022, okay? And we're going to talk about this coat hanger, this whole coat hanger deal. Many people are familiar with it, how, again, using Black pastors, politicians, physicians, to assist those who could not afford to pay for abortions. And so they use these pastors to take women, you know, down off in these alleys, and they would take these coat hangers. They would use sewing tools from sewing kits, all of these in order to help women abort their babies. And this is tragic. This was tragic. You know, they're not doing the coat hanger anymore, as you see here. Never again. And yeah. So I thought this was interesting. I had a thought, but I forgot. Let me see here. The coat hanger imagery is something that is more harmful than helpful, especially to people who have experiences or have loved ones or family history and stories of people who have suffered during those times before abortion was safe. And the fact that people keep saying safe, guys, let me tell you this. Nothing felt safe about me having abortions. There was nothing safe. In actuality, I was laying there each time praying to God to spare my life while I had paid for somebody to take the lives of these innocent babies. I mean, come on. I'm praying for my life to be spared, but I'm killing these innocent babies, not giving them a chance at all. There was nothing safe about that. Then you're left in that cold room. You just, you know, my poor legs were shaking and trembling so bad after what I had just encountered. Then you go home to darkness and depression, and you have to live with that. Okay. Let me see. Did I read that part? It refers to this idea that without legal, clinical, hospital-based abortion, people would take matters into their own hands and use various methods, including inserting sharp, penetrating objects through the cervix. Okay, I'm trying to get to this certain part. So now this is them promoting the pill. Again, saying that this is much safer than the whole coat hanger and method, because guys, this was being done without any any form of anesthesia when these abortions were being done by coat hangers. And some of these women, particularly Black women, especially little Black girls, if they got pregnant, this was being done against their will. You know, if they ended up pregnant, whether it was by incest or rape, if their family decided that she could not have that baby, then that girl was forced to have that abortion. Now I want to go back. Well, let's go here. We're going to look at a couple of scriptures. Well, my scriptures are on here. We can go back here. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint. I want us to look at this.
Pastors say to me, Victoria, I love what you're doing. I support what you're doing, but I can't bring you to my church to share your abortion testimony because I have pro-choice people sitting in my pews and I don't want to offend them. And what I tell those pastors is this: why do you have pro-choice people sitting in your churches? Because you're not preaching against sin, because you're not preaching about abortion. And you've got men and women sitting in your church week after week, like I was, begging for you to say something, because when you don't, Pastor, they're internalizing that to mean that's the one sin God could never forgive me because my own pastor won't talk about it.
Okay. So, and we're making our way. We're almost through here. Let me do this. Let me do this. Let me go here before we go into, excuse me, our other parts before we close this out. June 21st, 2024, abortion access in the United States. So this is the most recent map. And if you look at this map, it gives you the colors. So near total ban, if you see this, this looks like a kind of burgundy. So that's these states here. That's a near total ban. And going back to that article that I mentioned, when New Mexico, which is over here in the blue, no restrictions based on gestational duration, period. But when some of the doctors, you know, they were arguing that there were women, there were actually two ladies, I believe, in the article that was saying that they nearly died because the doctors in Texas would not perform emergency surgeries on them and, you know, the abortions, but the doctors were afraid to lose their license. And so New Mexico was saying, send them over here. You guys shouldn't have to be afraid. And so you see these, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these blue areas over here. These are places where there are no restrictions. Okay. But then you see up to 6 weeks in the red, you know, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, North Dakota, South Dakota. And then, you know, it goes on up. And again, I showed you guys my babies. So, you know, no restriction. That's green. This is the 26-week-old baby that I showed you guys. Okay. So the green, this blue, and this blue are all saying up to 26 weeks, you can still do the abortion. Up to the 3rd trimester, you can still do the abortion, or there are no restrictions at all, right? So, you know, let me get back to my map. Up to 18 weeks, you just got Utah for that one. Up to 15 weeks, just Arizona. And so one of the things that the Democrats are trying to say is that Trump is going to ban this. Guys, if you go and look what Trump said, Trump says that he's leaving that up to the state. It should not be the government. It should not be in the hands of the government. He wants each state to decide. And so that's why we're seeing this map the way that we are, because the states themselves have decided whether or not to go full force, where you can get the abortion up to the time of gestation. From gestation, from the time that this baby has breath, and you find out you're pregnant up until the time you're supposed to have that baby. And then there are those that are saying, you know, if you're past 6 weeks, no, you know, these red states, if you're past 6 weeks, you can't do it. So this is what the states have decided. So when you hear them saying Trump is going to do this, Trump made it clear how this should be handled. Okay. But I want to go back to this video. This lady was saying that pastors are not speaking on this. Those who are not in support of it, because those who are in support of it, they're using their pulpit. Jamal Bryant, for example. Jamal Bryant apologized. You know, he was upset. And you had all of these pastors that were upset when Roe v. Wade failed. And I'm trying to figure out, what Bible are they reading that shows support for abortion, that condones abortion? Because it's not in the Bible. You're not going to find anything in the Bible that supports. Now, before, well, let's go ahead. Let's look at Psalm 139. And these are more so, I'm going to get to some other examples, but these are more so. You probably hear these argued often or referenced often as it relates to those saying, well, it's really not a life. Listen, that's not even an argument I would even entertain. Psalm 139, 13 through 16 reminds us that you knitted me in my mother's womb. God formed us. He knitted us together in there. Only he could do this. Okay. Jeremiah 1 and 5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and I knew the plans, you know, that I had for you. Okay. You shall not murder. And it doesn't matter how people try to look at this, it's murder. It's murder if someone takes their mother's life and her and their baby dies. So we're not going to call it murder when you take a pill that's going to unalive this person inside of you? No, God looks at that as murder. That's murder. Romans 1:28, simply just talking about us. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips. Let me see, boastful, foolishness. Though they know, here it is. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but they give approval to those who practice them. Okay, and this is a very familiar verse if you go back up to Romans 1:19. We're very familiar with this verse, and it's just how we ignore God. We know that God exists, but we know the things that we're doing are against God, but we're just going to ignore them and do our own thing. I'm paraphrasing. Proverbs 6:16-19. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. This is hands that shed innocent blood. These are innocent babies. And in each case, it's tragic when incest happens and rape happens. But when we look at what scripture says, that this is shedding innocent blood, this is why the church has to speak up. If we got all of these pastors who are standing up and speaking, who are pro-choice, they are pro-women's rights, women's reproductive rights, then we've got to have more pastors. I'm not anybody's pastor. I'm just a kingdom servant. I'm a preacher, a Bible teacher. I'm not anybody's pastor, but I'm going to use my voice and I'm going to use my platform. But the influence that pastors have, there should be more pastors who are verbally, vocally, intentionally doing something about this, as we saw in the video. I'll share this, and I won't, it's personal, so I won't give a name, but I remember growing up, and there was a young lady that got pregnant very, very early, very dear to me. And I remember her getting pregnant. Nobody in the church asked any questions. When they found out she was pregnant, she got kicked out of the church, just out there. And the hurtful part was, this is someone that I love dearly. And that, we talk about church hurt now, that has scarred this person for life. So much so that they barely, they don't trust in the church. That was something that scarred this person. And it scarred me because I'm looking at this person that I love going, she's a child. Nobody even asked what happened. Who's going to comfort her? Who's going to educate her? And so that's where I get to this part here. I want to talk about those who are in support of, particularly pastors. When we think about what happened in Genesis 34:16-18, and this is the situation where Rachel is about to give birth to Benjamin. And Rachel's childbirth, she's in so much pain. And they had midwives back then. Rachel is in so much pain. Rachel is the one that dies, but Benjamin survives. Okay. And so if you want to find a scenario in the Bible that's an emergency, it was the mother who died. God is the giver of life. Okay. And so, some would look at, well, that's not fair because the baby was born, but the mom was taken away. Guys, we don't have any say-so in that. We don't, and I've known moms who decided that if a life has to be taken, take mine because I've lived. I want my baby to live, and that's got to be a difficult situation, because when you think about this child living without their mother, Well, this mother is saying, I'm not going to be selfish. I'd rather for my baby to live than for me to take my baby's life. Okay. And then we have this, we have Acts. I'm sorry, not Acts, Exodus. Exodus chapter 1, when it was the Hebrews that were outgrowing the Egyptians. Those Hebrew women were popping out those babies. And the Egyptians became fearful because they figured if these Hebrew women keep popping out these babies like this, they're going to outnumber us. And then they're going to end up oppressing us, because this was the time when Egypt was oppressing the Hebrews. Okay. And so, but these Hebrews were still having these babies. And so this is what Pharaoh says. Pharaoh says to the midwives, listen, when those women give birth, when the baby comes out, if you see that it's a boy, kill him. Kill these baby boys. And these midwives were like, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. Pharaoh came back and questioned him. He was like, why are y'all letting these baby boys live? Because it's understood that if these boys keep living, then they're going to procreate, which is what God ordained in Genesis with Adam and Eve, that they were to procreate, to replenish the earth. It's a blessing. Children are a blessing. They are a gift to us from God. And so these midwives said, no, we fear God. We can't take the lives of these babies. That's that we can't. We won't. Okay. And it's interesting because there are too many of us that's not willing to stand and say, no, I can't support that. It doesn't mean that I don't love you, which brings me to my next point, next couple of points. Okay. Rather than us getting behind and supporting abortion, and I'm talking about the church, why don't we have ministries? Why don't we have programs in our churches? Why don't we have, and I'm not saying all churches don't, because some churches probably do. It's up to parents to make sure that they bring their boys and their girls to those teachings. It's important for us to teach in our home. We are too afraid, or have been, especially in the past, afraid to have talks about sex education. And so many times in our churches, we're afraid to have those conversations. Well, guess what? Somebody is talking to our children about it. Somebody is enticing them and encouraging them. It could be people in your family. I've experienced that too, where I had a family member. We're trying to tell our daughter that she needs to abstain. We're not supporting this at that time. Insurance did not cover birth control. If you wanted birth control, you had to pay for that because it was not considered women's reproductive rights. It was not considered women's health care. And so while we're telling our daughter not to, and that she should save herself, we got family members who saying, oh girl, you should do it. And I know you're gonna get tempted. So if you get tempted, just come to me. You're gonna have people fighting against you. But here's the thing. We're responsible for teaching. If a person doesn't listen, that's on them. But we're responsible for teaching. Okay. So let me read this. What are we going to teach? I know it's not popular, but we still are responsible for teaching purity. We're still responsible for teaching abstinence. We're still responsible for teaching that marriage sex outside of marriage is a sin. It's called fornication. Okay. Rape is violating, is stealing. You violate the image of God inside of another human being. Incest You're violating the image of God inside of another human being. And that does bring shame, that does bring pain to that person, that young lady who has to carry this baby as a result of rape, or that young girl who has to hide her pregnancy because it was her brother or her uncle or her dad or her stepdad or her grandfather or a friend of the family who has impregnated her, and she doesn't know what to do. So with the church, we've got to consider all of this. We've got to consider the person who is considering abortion. We've got to have ministries. We've got to have women of God in place who will counsel them and pray with them and offer supplies to them and direct them to community resources to say, hey, there are other ways. Let's look at other ways, and not let abortion just be, because that's what's being pushed so much now. So people don't even consider other options. But there are so many other options. There are women who cannot have babies. They're doing IVF and all of this. So in the church, we can't sit by anymore and ignore this when there is this push for women to kill their babies. And then we get up in the pulpits and we support it. No, God is going to judge us. He is seriously going to judge us. And if you think about it now, and as I was studying the other day and I was just praying, I said, it's interesting, God, how we're passing laws to kill these innocent babies. We're murdering these babies, but we're upset because think about this. Children are watching these movements. They're watching us fight for the right to kill our babies. And now our children are out here killing as well. So we're upset when we see the crime in our city, when we see the crime in our country by these young people. How dare we get upset with them when what we're showing them is that life doesn't matter. Life is not important. They're looking at us like, well, if y'all fighting for the right to kill babies, what's wrong with us killing too? We don't consider things like that. Let me see. I'm almost done here. If women who are rebellious and dogmatic, like Kamala Harris and Margaret Sanger and so many others who push for these rights, who go and solicit the support of pastors, physicians, pharmacists, I call them pulpit pirates. These are people who they could care less about what God's word said, and they will even twist it to support the agenda. Because I'm convinced that those who get behind this and support this from their pulpits are getting a cut from the government in some shape, form, or fashion. But you're compromising. You're compromising, and shame on you. And they do it boldly. Jamal Bryant was boldly up there. He was upset. You would have thought that somebody had took away his rights. And then we're not considering the rights of fathers. Not all fathers abandon their children. And so that father who it may not even be told that the woman is pregnant, or the father who's not even considered, what about his rights? Or are we just going to go with Margaret Sanger? There are no gods, no masters. We don't have to give an account to anybody. And I tell you this, we most certainly will. We have to make sure that we are teaching in the church. If nothing else, we may not be able to stop. The election is coming. This will be on the ballot in many of these states, because one thing about it, they are adamant about making sure that every state is forced, demanded, required to support abortion. And they will use any means that they can to say it's emergency, and women's rights are being taken, and it's affecting their overall health and all of this. If they can do this, then surely a few of us can stand up with God behind us and for us and in us, and we can make some noise and say no. And we can talk to our young girls and not put them out of the church. We can talk to our women if they've made a mistake. For someone who has had the abortion, for someone who got pregnant by rape or incest, or someone who just it was her body. She did what she wanted and she got pregnant. We've got to be willing to sit down and have the conversation and talk to people and offer some guidance and counseling and let them know that God offers forgiveness. I started this video about talking about that. Once I realized that God had forgiven me for what I had done multiple times, it freed me. And so there are women who are probably right now living with guilt, young girls who are living with guilt. You're living in depression. You're living in a dark place as a result of what you've done. Even if you are somebody who it hasn't bothered you at all, I want to encourage you and I want to pray for you that God is a forgiver. And if you repent and if you confess, God will forgive you for that thing. And he doesn't hold it over your head. And he may just use you to be an advocate, to be a voice, to help someone else. But if you're in that space, please know that you can be forgiven and that you can have a bright future, and you don't have to let that keep you in a place of depression, a place of regret, a place of darkness. Because you think about this, with this whole movement, we're saying these are our bodies and we can do whatever we want to do with them. That's a lie. If anything were to go wrong, even people who don't believe in God or who are not Christians, the first time something goes wrong, if we get a headache that lasts too long, the first thing, and it could be as a result. It could be as a result of something we've done. We've smoked too much. We've drank too much. We've whatever the case is. I guarantee you, we're gonna be praying, even if we don't pray out loud. We're gonna be praying on the inside. When we abuse our bodies, the moment we think we're about to die, we pray and we ask God, or we ask other people to please pray for us that God will heal our bodies. Our bodies are not our own, especially those of us who are married. And this is a woman that you saw was married. Kamala Harris is married. I don't know if her husband and his children, that they, I don't know if they share her views, but it's so interesting that people can have such views and not realize the impact that it's having on the girls and the boys who are looking to them, hoping that they offer some guidance and some direction. And our only solution is, oh yeah, sure, this is safe. Just go home and take these pills. You'll be fine. And you can move on with your life. That should not be the case for those of us who are, let me come off this screen share. I should have been off this screen share. That should not be the case for those of us who profess faith in Christ. The Bible does not condone abortion. God provides too many alternatives. That doesn't have to be the way out. And even if it was rape and if it was incest, there are support groups out here. Preferably, it starts in your family, the support. There are churches out here that will support you and walk you through that stage, whether it was rape, whether it was incest, whatever the case may be. There are people out here, there are programs in every community that can assist you if you decide to keep your baby. There are programs that set you up with adoption, and they're getting so creative now. They have adoption where you can still be a part, you can choose the family, and you can request to still be able to know how your baby is doing, because oftentimes adoption is not considered because you don't want to have to face that child later on in life, and that child wonder, why did you give me up, why didn't you want me? So some people don't want to live with that regret, so it's just best to just kill the baby, right? And so I just want to encourage you that there are alternatives. And if you know someone that's struggling with having had abortions, or who's considering abortions, pray with them, talk to them, um, share with them some other alternatives, besides just taking the life of a baby, because we wouldn't want someone to just take our life, um, without any regards to it. And the baby, somebody has to be the voice for the unborn, and I'm willing to be that person. And so I hope that this has encouraged someone, that it has helped you, that it has encouraged you, and that, you know, whether you're a pastor or whether your pastor is in support of it, I pray and encourage you to question your pastor and ask him or her, uh, you know, how can you get behind this? How can you support this, um, as a pastor, as a man or a woman of God? Can you show me in the scripture where this says do this? And don't let them pull the emergency surgery. No, it's not a lot of those. It's absolutely not. So I will be posting the links to those articles. You know, if you're interested, you can click on those, and those videos as well. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.